This is Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness Legislative Action Committee meeting for November. I'm Lisa Chapman.
It needs to fit into their market rent.
First thing I want to ask is if everyone and I muted myself. So if we could all mute to make sure that we'll have the best sound quality. Feel free to unmute if you want to ask a question or make a comment. I'd like to invite you to do that. I have to apologize. I'm a little under the weather, so I'm a little congested. So sorry about my voice, but we're going to press on. So, of course, my computer is not cooperating with me today. There we go. So our agenda for today is to just say hello, a little housekeeping, which I think I've already pretty much done. We have a guest speaker, one of our own, Amy Stevenson, who is our MCAH communications manager, will be joining us, and she's going to talk about Homeless Awareness Month. Then Eric will do some federal updates. I will do a few state updates and little info pieces, and share a few things from MCAH. And then we want to hear from you about what's going on around the state, anything you're hearing about or experiencing, comments and thoughts that you might have, and then adjourn. Our next meeting is Monday, December 5th. So without further ado, we can invite Amy to do her presentation on Homeless Awareness Month, which it is right now.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'd also like to acknowledge one of our Blue Cross Blue Shield sponsors are here, as I saw in the chat, Ms. Price. So thank to her and her organization for being one of our sponsors for Homeless Awareness Month. My name is Amy Stevenson, and on the next slide, we're just going to jump into a quick walkthrough of what we mean by Homeless Awareness Month, what tools are available to you. And whoops, you can go back one more. So the first thing, just to make sure we're all on the same page, is just to talk about who we are, which I think you all know, but we are also kind of the backbone of the event and trying to provide resources and tools to agencies around the state. So sorry, Lisa, it was the next slide. And this is the one. I know you know who we are. Homeless Awareness Month that takes place every November. And the goal of the event is just to raise, awareness about housing insecurity and homelessness, and just to make sure that we're getting communities involved in making a difference. We've been involved in it, and the event has taken place one way or another for about 20 years. And beyond housing and homeless agencies participate in this event. I'm working with a student group at Michigan State University as an example. There are churches, so it's not just housing entities that take part in this event. Next slide, please. One of the ways that MCAH supports the folks who do wish to take part in Homeless Awareness Month is the toolkit. And on the next slide, I'll walk through what's involved in the toolkit and where you can find it. You can go to the next slide, Lisa. So the toolkit, and I will drop a link to it in the chat as well, but the toolkit is something that's been emailed out. It's on our website, and I'll make sure you have a copy. But we acknowledge you all are really busy with a lot of other things going on, and so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time, we have a toolkit available that helps you prepare for the events, and it's not too late to do so. How to roll out if education is your vision for your upcoming event, or advocacy. We have two sections to help give you some ideas for either one of those types of outreach. And then regardless of which one you choose, whether it's an educational direction or an advocacy piece, you have to communicate that out somehow to your community or the media, your funders. And so we also have a communication piece in the toolkit about how to write a press release if there's social media support that you need. And then the very final part of the toolkit is that your work isn't done in November. How you had some suggested best practices of how to wrap things up for your project and prepare you for the following year. And before we proceed to the next slide, I wanted to point out that little 5-minute graphic at the bottom, the hashtag Ham in Real Life. The whole toolkit is designed, because I know you all don't have a half a day to review 40 pages. It's pretty brief, and then we take breaks throughout to talk about what are some Ham in Real Life projects that you could do in under 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, depending on your capacity and your planning time. So I'll make sure the link is in the chat, but as you scroll through it, make sure you keep an eye out for that bright yellow clock, because that'll give you examples of real world projects. And we also have a plethora of those in other places as well, but in the toolkit, we've built it in as you go for kind of inspiration. All right, thanks, Lisa. And in the following slide after this one, every year we have a theme that we reach out to our members and ask them to pick. And I just want to, in the presentation have done about him, always wanted to thank Miss Samantha Morrison. She was our winner. She created this beautiful image around our theme, homeless, not hopeless. And so you'll see that on our toolkit. You'll see that in some of our social media images. And then we also have had some staff members reply around that theme, what gives them hope about solving the homeless crisis. And you'll see those as part of our social media campaign, what gives people hope in working in this capacity. So you're welcome to share this image. It's available in different places, and you can also use it as part of your promotion. All right, Lisa, next slide. This is an example of our very own of one of those social media creations. This happens to be Lisa in her quote. And if you follow us on social media, whether it's our regular Facebook page or the particular one for Homeless Awareness Month, and I'll make sure you have links to both. This is just one of many images that we've already created that you are welcome to share as part of your Homeless Awareness Month outreach. Some are more data driven about housing. Those will be rolling out this week, but this is just one of an example of many that we've made around our theme, homeless, not hopeless. So thank you, Lisa, for responding with your kind words. All right, on the next slide, besides the toolkit that you could look through, the next slide will tell you other resources that we have for Homeless Awareness Month. And our goal, you can go to the next slide, Lisa. Our goal is to make this as easy for you all as possible. And so this is where I want to take a quick break to stop talking and ask in the chat, are there any of you that have started your Homeless Awareness Month projects, and what are they? If you want to drop those in the chat. And if you haven't started it, which is fine, a lot of folks haven't, although I've been getting a lot of emails and Google alerts and things with great activity going around the state. If you haven't started it, what would you say is the biggest barrier to prevent you from participating? And it's totally fair to say, because I've never heard of it until today attending this meeting, that's okay. But if you want to share some of that in the chat, we'd love to hear about current projects, or if you haven't started, why that may be. And that leads me into this slide, which is the resources that you have besides the toolkit and what you could utilize. And so we have on our blog, even if you don't have a lot of time to do the research, on some reading list you could provide to your community or a training, we try to put those out to the community to save you time to do that. And I'm just going to scroll through here for a quick moment. So as an example in the chat, there's an event coming up on November 15th, and I'll make sure we have this, Amanda. I think I already have the information, but we'll make sure we have that on our public facing Homeless Awareness Month calendar. Lynn, for social media newsletter and book group, I don't know if you can take yourself off speaker, but do you mind telling us a little bit more of what that means?
Yeah, sure. No, we're doing a book group. We're reading Made, and then it's in collaboration with the Fair Housing Center of West Michigan and the Allegan County local planning body. And so we're organizing it around those three counties, Kent, Ottawa, and Allegan. And so we'll do a Zoom meeting at the end of the month on the 29th and discuss that book.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
And if you have any further links or anything around that, you can either drop it in the chat or email me. I'd be happy to promote it on our social media also. And another piece that ties back into this toolkit here that we provide, excuse me, the toolkit and the blogs are the last Homeless Awareness Month newsletter. I think it just was sent out this morning, actually. One thing you could do is just host a training. And so I'm trying to give examples of things that wouldn't require a lot of bandwidth or capacity. And one example is either training we've already done, which is available on our YouTube channel. And I put that in our Homeless Awareness Month newsletter that went out this morning. Or you can just coordinate a training that's coming up. And we have one on the 17th, and that's around the housing choice voucher. And we can drop a link into that as well for you to register, but that could just be inviting folks to attend that training and then maybe having a speaker from your community attend after. So there's lots of different ways that you can roll out these projects. And we have everything from like a 5K race or people that are sleeping outside. There's a whole host of activities. And so in our blog, we have examples of those. Some are just 5 or 10 minutes. We have a certain blog that's just for shorter projects, and then we have some that are longer and more involved. But I would say it's never too late for you to plan that if you haven't. All right, I'm just going to pop in to make sure a few folks sent me a text, and I don't want to. Great, thank you, Ryan and Kim. So a lot of social media awareness campaigns, community awareness, and then there's a walk at a local community college. Part of Micah's role in all these wonderful events that you're listing in the chat is to also make sure we promote it. So if I don't have it, I'll go back through and make sure we have these links. I put them out on our social media pages as well. If it's appropriate to be forward facing to the public, we definitely want to share them. Oh, that's great, Anna. I just saw your comment there. I'll follow back up with you to make sure it's okay if we use that as part of our post, but thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. I would love to include that as part of our campaign for What Gives You Hope. And speaking of the blog and resources, whether you've used the toolkit or you've looked at our blog, also, whether it's emailing me or putting it in the chat here, if there are other resources that you'd like to see, that a tool that you found or that was very handy in planning your event, we are constantly updating these materials. So feel free to send those to me or in the chat if you want to drop something that we hadn't thought of, but that was successful for your organization. We'd love to hear from you, what that may be. And thank you for all the sharing and dropping of things. Sorry, it's hard to go back and forth, so I'll make sure that I look at those. All right, Lisa, next slide. And so we talked a little bit earlier, if you're currently working on a HAMB event, which there are some awesome ones I saw in the chat, and I'm so excited. I was just updating my master spreadsheet of all these, so I'll make sure I get these. Some of you might still be in the planning. I do want to take some time though, just to make sure we have space for folks who are struggling to choose an event where you're like, oh my, it's November 7th. It's the first time I've heard of this. I have no idea what I'm doing. If that's the case, you are not alone. I had folks emailing me over the weekend, sending me their flyers that they just put together, asking me for some ideas. And so I just also want to share with you, you're not alone if you haven't had time to even think about this. And that's what Micah is here for. I'm happy to chat with you, or if you want to put it in the chat. When I did a larger webinar around this, one of the common barriers was funding. Like, I have lots of great ideas, but the age-old problem is, who am I going to get to pay for it? So we have tools about soliciting sponsorships from people or hitting up businesses. The people in Traverse City have a partnership with area businesses where they have drop baskets in their place of business. So I know funding and time are the two biggest issues, but in the chat, are there any inspiring solutions you might have to that, or suggest other barriers that we're not familiar with that's causing the biggest frustration in moving forward? If you want to share that, feel free.
Oh.
But if funding is what is holding you back, reach out to me, because maybe I can help you with soliciting a sponsor in your community or a business or somebody that might help to be like Blue Cross Blue Shield is to us, to help us support the effort. All right, Lisa, thanks. Next slide. Whoops, can you go back? Okay, thanks. And the one piece I also want to really stress is, although Micah provides the toolkits, we provide the blogs. I provide, support anytime you want to reach out on social media or press releases. You all are really the experts on what works best in your community. And so it looks different for every agency or partnership or church or school or entity. You know what is needed in your community, maybe where there's the gap in information that needs to be filled. It's different for every community. So I just want to stress that as well, that you may look through our suggested projects and think, none of this really seems like a good fit. They're there just for inspiration. You can come up with something that you know would work better for you, or contact me and we can kind of talk through that. And I feel like I'm missing stuff in the chat, but I had somebody mention about interns. We've used interns to help this year. I had 3 interns contact me last week, actually, about can you help me make some images and things like that. And so I know with interns, the learning curve is steep, or you may not have a lot of time. Direct them to our blog, because we had images that I already saw Lighthouse retweeted already that we rolled out on Friday. So our blogs are a great place to take your staff or interns to, so that they're not just starting from scratch. All right, Lisa, next slide, if you don't mind. Thank you, Kim. I misspoke about Blue Cross. There's so many entities. I may have misspoken from a different Blue Cross sponsor, but thank you for that correction. We're still going to thank Blue Cross no matter where you're from. Okay, the last piece, because I want to make sure we have room for Lisa's rest of her agenda, is whenever I leave a webinar, I just kind of sit there and go, okay, now what am I supposed to do with all this information? And so if you could just jot down, and I'll make sure all of this is in the chat. The first thing is just, if you have an event, to make sure it's registered with us so that we can promote it. And if you've already put it in our chat, you don't need to do that twice. I'll make sure I get it. And the second thing is just to review the resources. Go to our website, take a look at the toolkit and the blogs, and just see where you might be able to participate. The third thing is to join our Homeless Awareness Month Facebook group. And the link to that is on the website. That is where I post project ideas every day, our sponsor information, but just where you can go in and check in for inspiration. And then lastly, when I did my introduction at the beginning of the meeting, I included my email address. You are welcome to reach out to us, to me at any time for support, whatever that might look like. So that's what I would just suggest from here you do to move forward. All right, Lisa, I think that was it.
Thank you, Amy. That was very, very good, really robust, and I'm sure everyone appreciates the offers of assistance and all the great resources. So
Yes,
and see what people are coming up with around the state, and keep us posted, as Amy said. Okay, of course,
and I will drop those links in the chat. Even though I know we've moved on to the next subject, I'll make sure that we have those before we wrap up today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Amy. All right, now we are going to move on to some federal updates, and Eric, you are up.
Ooh, everybody, strap on your hats. A lot going on yet, year end. Just wanted to give you kind of a quick update in the last few meetings, to give you an update on specific legislation where things were, but want to just kind of talk more generally about what's happening now at the federal level. So we know that members of Congress have been home campaigning. Yes, there are midterms for those of you who have not crawled out of your home, you see the ads constantly, TV, radio. It's just, it's painful at times. But they're not going to be back in DC until after the midterms. So we'll see shortly after tomorrow that they will be there. Some of you has taken advantage of the opportunity to meet with some of those folks while they're home in their districts. We appreciate that. But the year-end work, the legislative agenda that they're going to be returning to is really going to have a lot of competing interests. And so we want to pay attention to that. Again, the squeaky wheel. The last stretch of time after the election, before the new Congress takes office in January, is called the lame duck session, as you know. And sometimes not much is eked out, and other times there's a whole bunch of stuff that gets jammed through at the end. But there are some things that are considered must-do legislation that are going to have to be addressed that I think the members of Congress will try to take care of this year. They don't want to punt it to the next Congress. You don't know what you're going to get because life is like a box of chocolates after an election. So I know that there are some things, including some tax legislation, that they're going to want to take care of. So I've identified 3 areas. One is finishing up on the appropriations bill that we've talked about over the last several meetings, and then the National Defense Authorization Act of 2023 and year-end tax package that I alluded to a little bit. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as far as appropriations goes, we know that there had been some budgets that had come out of committees. Just to let you know, even though they have been working in the lead up to the election back in the district, congressional and appropriation staff have continued their behind the scenes discussions to hammer out a final fiscal year 2023 spending bill. They're going to be coming back in mid-November, but the session is brief. So they're only going to have about a week to get some things done before they leave again for Thanksgiving break. So the week of November 14th is really important when we think in terms of getting our messaging out between now and then, because action will take place. So keep that in mind. Next slide, please. So talking about the appropriations bill, this is a slide similar to what you've seen in the past, where we've identified some things that we believe are key components of any spending package, an appropriations package. Just putting it out there for you to take a look at. Again, this is the kind of messaging that's really important for us to convey to members of Congress, to key in on those things that we think are extremely important. And these are some areas of the National Low Income Housing Coalition has been advocating for, and we're in support of that. So we're keying in on these areas as well. Next slide. Thank you. So there is a sign-on letter. So this is the call to action. This is one of those things that's very painless and easy for you to do, but it's an organizational sign-on letter, not for individuals this time around, but for your organization or other organizations that you work with, that you can reach out to, asking them to join in as a partner in the Campaign for Housing and Community Development Funding. That is a national campaign that has many partners, including the National Low Income Housing Coalition and other stakeholders. The group, the campaign, is calling for Congress to work together to ensure affordable housing and community development programs receiving the highest allocation of discretionary funds possible in fiscal year 2023. So again, this is where we have a voice in urging our elected officials to make housing programming a priority. So organizations are urged to sign on to the campaign's 302B letter. For those of you who don't know what that is, that I'm not going to get into details too much, but each subcommittee is allocated a certain amount of funding under the committee's 302 allocation. So that establishes a cap for each of the appropriations bill. This is just conveying what would be a request with respect to how those dollars would be used within what is their discretionary funding based on that 302B limit. And I will be tossing a link into the chat for you so that you'd be able to access that link to sign on to the letter. And again, it's very simple to do. Next slide, please. I talked about let me see here. I referenced something. I don't want to skip over it because I don't want anybody saying, well, he said something about it, but he didn't talk about it. The National 23, it's not on this slide, but I'm just kind of freelancing on this one. That is something that needs to be put in place because in essence, what it does is set the defense spending. And once you have the defense spending in place, that affects what dollars may be left over to access for the remainder of the appropriations process. So that is a very key piece. There is a draft that has been circulated, and of course, everybody likes to tack on stuff to that. But once that's in place, then you have some hard numbers actually for all those committees to finalize their portions of the appropriations process. But also during the year, when you get towards the end of the year, one of the things that members of Congress have to think about are things that are tax extenders. So there are tax provisions that are authorized quite often that for a fixed number of years. So a set number of years where they might otherwise sunset, meaning that they would just simply end unless Congress takes some action to reinstate them or continue them. And so this is an opportunity typically for Congress to be reevaluating them periodically and decide whether or not it's an extension of those provisions are appropriate and whether or not to extend them out or just, again, let them sunset and die a quiet death. So with a number of the tax provisions up for extension at the end of this year, the tax extender package is an opportunity to expand and make needed legislative changes to the low-income housing tax credit program. And so this is an opportunity to try to enhance it in a way that will better serve households with the lowest incomes. And that's what's being suggested here. So there are a few things just identified through the National Low Income Housing Coalition as opportunities within that negotiation, providing incentives to serve extremely low income housing or low income households and people experiencing homelessness. It also looks at eliminating a qualified contract loophole, which I don't want to bore you to death on that one, but in essence, when you have a property that would have a 30-year life on its contract, can actually be pulled out early, and I won't explain exactly why that would be, but in essence, there are developers who are trying to get out of their 30-year commitment, making it a 15-year commitment, and then be able to turn around and sell their property. So it pulls those units out of the affordable housing pool prematurely. And it really is just a loophole that's being used because it can be relatively lucrative to move those properties early. So a fix that I think is a long time coming, but something that's important nonetheless, because we're bleeding units, affordable housing units, so we need to have that one corrected. And then the last item there specifically identifying here as some targets would be extending the vital renter protections to tenants living in LIHTC properties. There's more information about all of these things. I'll drop some information into the chat so that you can actually see a multi-page summary of these provisions and other provisions so that you can get a better sense of what it is. But again, this is an opportunity for us to communicate how important it is for extending the LIHTC provisions, but also making some changes that we think are going to enhance the program significantly. Next slide. So guess what? We got nothing left. We didn't have anything else again about updates on specific pieces of legislation, but I'm going to drop some things into the chat so that you can access some additional information and to take some action as well. We would hope that you'd be in a position to do that. Very important for us to keep the pressure on before the lame duck ends and we get into who knows what next year, because it could be quite dicey for us if indeed we lose the House and with respect to the supporters we have, not not R&D, but when we think in terms of who is supporting the work that we're doing in the House, that may change substantially. So we want to get some things done now that we might not be able to do otherwise, or things that might change significantly in priority. Are there any questions anybody has before I kick it over to Lisa? I know that she's anticipating this greatly. She wants to get right into her stuff because I had her prompt with a slide, but does anybody have any questions? You can toss it into the chat box or come off mute and ask away. Okay, I gave us a 3-second robust timing, dramatic pause to wait for it. No questions. I see a comment from Amanda, so everybody can take a look at that. A qualified contract loophole was used by several LIHTC development owners in Washtenaw County, who lost nearly 1,000 units of affordable housing since 2015 because of it. So can't understate the importance of this. You might not have known that even existed, but when we're having problems trying to develop enough units to catch up to where we need to be, we don't want to see any fall off unnecessarily. So guardrails that I think are really important here. Thank you for sharing that, Amanda. And then also Lynn is suggesting that as well in Ottawa County. So it is, it's potentially a problem in many communities around the state. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Lisa. There you go, Lisa. It's all yours.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, for all your robust comments. We definitely do not want to lose ground on the units that we already have. So really important advocacy. Just on the state level, not a lot happening because, as you may know, there's an election happening tomorrow. And a lot of the candidates have been busy campaigning. So a couple things that we're kind of looking at for potentially for movement this year, in terms of potentially a vote, there's a House Bill 5566, which is a late fee bill, which we have not talked about before, but provides up to 10% additional late fees that could be super problematic for people that are on low incomes, fixed incomes. It's really potentially an issue. So we want to kind of keep an eye on that one, as well as the short-term rental bill, which is referred to the Senate committee now. Hasn't had any movement in about a month, but we're also looking at that to see if there's, keeping an eye on to see if anything's happening yet this year. We talked about the lame duck session in the federal Congress, but also statewide. There could be an option for some housing funding in the supplemental budget bill that could come yet this year. So we are watching that. And if anybody, Eric, can you keep an eye on the chat? I can't really do it very well when I'm sharing.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So let me see if I can advance my own slide. Here we go. So just a few other things other than like legislative things we just want to make you aware of. The Michigan Campaign to End Homelessness data report from 2021 was just released. I believe there was a 2% overall decrease in homelessness. And then there's a lot of great information on targeted populations, looks at regions. It's a really robust, really well done report. So make sure that you, if you haven't seen that in your inbox, it's on the Campaign to End Homelessness website. Also, MISHDA, in partnership with CEDAM and Enterprise, are hosting these affordable housing development town hall meetings to look at the qualified allocation plan, which governs the statewide allocation of the tax credit program. And also they're proposing to apply a racial equity impact assessment to the qualified allocation plan as a process. So they're gathering feedback, and they have two different mechanisms to do that. They have virtual town halls, both November 9th and 16th in the evenings at 6:30. But they also just released late last week, and again, I saw it today in my inbox, a survey that people can fill out to give them comments on this proposed impact assessment. So please keep your eye out for that. And if you have comments, they would love to hear your feedback. And lastly, the Michigan Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence is hoping to gather feedback from service providers throughout the state as a part of their comprehensive needs assessment. So they're inviting folks to a virtual listening session this week on November 10th from 1 to 2:30. And if you'd like to participate in that, you can email China Aquino, and I have her email right there. So I just wanted to take your temperature for a moment, if you wouldn't mind indulging us. So we wanted to have some feedback and some conversation with people around policy priorities that Micah would adopt for 2023 to have a discussion with you. So we want to hear if people are interested in participating in an in-person session in Lansing. That's number one. We would potentially do it Tuesday, December 13th at our offices. Could be a small group, and we would, be mindful of COVID distancing and, respectful of, people's time. We could also send out a survey to get people's thoughts. We could do a Zoom meeting and get people's input. So I'm wondering if people have any preference as to if you want to participate, and if so, how. So feel free to unmute yourself, or if you want to put something in the chat, if you'd be willing to participate. Amanda.
Hi, everyone. This is Amanda Carlisle from the Washtenaw Housing Alliance. I would love to have a discussion like this. And I know it's not accessible for all to meet in person, but I do find things like this would be really great to have in person, because you kind of just can build off of each other in different ways. So I would definitely support meeting in person, and then maybe doing like a survey, to get more people's interest, or a Zoom, but personally would love to be in person.
Great, thank you. Anyone else?
And Lisa, there's quite a few people in the chat that have weighed in as well in favor of that idea.
In person?
Mhm.
Okay.
This is Natalie from Community Housing Network. I would like to just throw in the caveat potentially of either a hybrid virtual or a tentative virtual option, because the weather in Michigan, as we know, in December, I would hate for it just to be completely canceled if it was scheduled in person.
Sure.
Or, for folks who, like myself, are road chickens and might not brave the weather, that we may still be able to at least hear the conversation that y'all are having in person. I think that would be impactful too.
Great. Appreciate it. Yes. We don't know what the weather is going to be on December 13th. And it could be dicey. So yeah. Appreciate hearing that. Anyone else?
I love the hybrid idea, just so we make sure it's available to everyone around the state. So definitely can help you with that. It's a
Yay.
great suggestion.
Yeah. Thanks. All right. Thanks for your input. Just a couple quick wrap up things. Michael participated in an Our Homes, Our Votes effort with our partners at National Low Income Housing Coalition. We did election work this year again. We focused around those three pillars: voter registration, education, and candidate engagement. You can see that candidate surveys have been posted. They have been for a little while, and we've also been taking some of the quotes that we got, some of the comments on an open-ended question at the end, and putting them out there on our social media platforms, and really got some great, thoughtful, kind of priorities and perspectives and values from the candidates. So those are really great to see. If you haven't voted already and you're unsure about what you're going to do tomorrow, those are great to look at, to check in and see if your candidate weighed in with us. Just wanted to, of course, you know that the election is tomorrow, unless you've been under a rock. And I hate to say it, but I actually look forward to the end of the election just because I'm so tired of seeing all of those campaign ads. So that's one way, let's vote and do it and then move on because no one wants to see those ads anymore. All right.
And Lisa, I dropped in the chat 2 links to just 2 of the many blogs. And I think I saw Jaren on the call somewhere who was instrumental in
Yes.
helping me as the communications person get this all assembled. So those are just 2. One is the very comprehensive state response. There were like 70. You could just find your person and click on it. Another one were just some pie charts at a glance. So there's more. I just didn't want to inundate the chat, but you can take a look at just 2 of the many examples. And thank you, Jaren, for your help with that.
Yes, thank you, Jaren. Jaren was our intern who's been with us throughout this whole Our Homes, Our Votes effort. So we really appreciate all his work on getting the candidates to respond and reaching out to them. So thank you. And thanks, Amy. Appreciate all your support as well. Couple things we wanted to make you aware of if you have people in housing or people that you're supporting. There are a lot of great resources for transportation for election, getting to vote. So Lyft is doing discounted rides, and thank you, Courtney from National Low Income Housing Coalition for pointing us to this. You have to preload the code VOTE22. I think in the app, and then you can go ahead and use it. SMART, which is the Southeast Michigan Transportation System, is offering free rides to anyone, anywhere on November 8th. It can be the polls or it can be anywhere else. I Googled transportation on voting day and got a lot of great resources. Clinton County and also CATA, which is the Lansing area, capital area, are offering free rides. Mogo, which is a free bike, one of those, bikes that you can just rent, is offering free bikes in Detroit tomorrow on the 8th. So it probably is going to be decent weather to ride your bike. So if you want to do that to get you to the polls. And then in Saginaw, Stars Transportation and MTA and Flint are offering free rides. So you could check out if none of these are in your area, you could check it out for folks that you're supporting. But it's really great to see how many resources there are for encouraging people to get out to vote. I'll leave you with one last thing around voting. And I did hear actually an interesting statistic over the weekend. I heard that before Labor Day, across the country, about 70% of people had already made up their mind who they were going to vote for before Labor Day. So these last couple of months have been focused on the other 30%. This is one of my favorite quotes, though, about voting and about the importance of voting, from Gloria Steinem, who said, "Whenever I meet someone who vacillates on whether or not to vote because there isn't a perfect candidate, I tell them the voting booth is the one place on earth where the least powerful and the most powerful are equal. Who would pass that up?" Couple quick things from Micah. As Amy mentioned, we do have our next training for this month. It's Understanding the Housing Choice Voucher Program. It's always on a Monday, well, typically, from 1 to 2. And I think she already put the information in the chat, but if not.
I did. I put the information in the chat. And this one's actually from 1:30
2:30?
to 3 for some
Oh,
reason. But they are normally all the same, but this one for some reason is not. So
Thanks,
it's from
Allison.
1:30 till 3. Thank you.
And welcome back, Allison. So yeah, there's a lot of information there, so I'm sure that's why it's an extended one. Great, and now we've come to the part of the hour where we'd love to hear from you. Anything that's going on around your area, if you want to talk about the election or any issues, any legislation, anything that's going on around homeless response? Anybody? Amanda?
Hi, me again, sorry.
Yeah,
Um,
no, don't be sorry. Love to hear from you.
I was curious if anybody or any communities have signed on to HUD's Housing America platform, and I'll put it in the chat. I wasn't familiar with it, but a community member, a service provider, shared it with me last week. And I was just curious if any communities had signed on to it, or their mayors in particular, or elected officials.
Great. Anyone? I don't see any hands. Anyone familiar with this? They get something new.
All right, well, maybe look into it and just see if it's
will.
something that, it was really, I think, around the investments in the ARPA funding program, but it seems like, I know in our county, we are sliding backwards a little bit in terms of our elected officials' understanding of the work to end homelessness, the need to do it, how to do it, why more funding is important, and how to use that funding. And so we're looking for maybe some sort of, we've done the Built for Zero initiative. We might be kind of swinging back around to that, but also just looking for some other ways to get our elected officials more committed, I will say, to the work of ending homelessness.
Yeah, and that's actually something that we've been thinking and talking about a little bit. We have another grant with our partners at National Low Income Housing Coalition around a race and rental arrears to stop evictions, focused on tenant protections, but also new ERA programs, but also around educating local officials around, you know, the complex issues around homelessness and proven solutions. We've also talked in the past few months about what we are seeing and our national partners are seeing around kind of some of the erosion around housing first and pushback, criminalization of homelessness, and you know, some issues around more punitive measures. So something that we're definitely hoping to work on next year, and it could be something, you know, in terms of our policy priorities, but I agree with you. It's time.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, Washtenaw is very liberal in most of its politics and whatnot, and we are even having that conversation around criminalization, and it just feels like, whoa, like we are really going backwards, and not accepting of people's circumstances and why they are experiencing homelessness or housing insecurity. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for raising that. Anyone else? Any thoughts?
Yeah, just to follow up on that a little bit. I know that Eric mentioned a couple of meetings ago that there had been kind of it seemed like there was a pushback on housing first across the country. And there was an organization locally that brought in a national organization to you know, propose a process for addressing poverty and homelessness, and specifically called out housing first as an ineffective model, and, well, not only ineffective but dangerous. And so fortunately, there weren't a lot of people who attended the meetings. They did actually reach out to elected officials, and there were several in the room. So I was able to follow up with all of them and got some, you know, positive feedback from them on their take on the presentation. But it was just kind of unfortunate and disappointing to me that they would be making such a push against something that we as a COC have embraced and find to be a very effective model. So just an update on that.
Yeah, and Lynn, do you remember what entity that was?
Yeah,
So-
it was called True Charity.
Oh, okay, that's a new one, because I know that there's Cicero Institute, which is a national kind of entity that's been working in a number of different states and has, if you look at their website, they have a lot of information that is not exactly accurate and sample language for legislation and more punitive, you have pushback, criminalization, promoting things that are really against what we know works and the housing first philosophy and all those kinds of things. So I also wanted to mention that our partners at National Low Income Housing Coalition, as well as some of the other national partners like National Alliance and many others, have resources and a website about Housing First and specifically about some of the efforts to erode that. So we can share that information, or I can't see this chat, so I can't tell if it's already been shared, but there's some really great information. And we've also talked with our partners at the state level, at the campaign, to make sure they're all aware of this and make sure that we're kind of on high alert so that if we hear of something that's being pushed here that is, you know, anti all of the efforts that we've collectively been promoting, that we can help step in and provide resources and information to kind of combat that. So appreciate all your, yes.
Yeah, the wonderful Courtney Cooperman did post something here in the chat, which is
Thank you,
information from NLIHC and the resources that they have on their website. And I would suggest that you all take a look at it if you're interested in the issue of housing first. But thank you, Lynn, for bringing this up, because this is the kind of stuff that I think we all need to be aware of, that it's kind of under the radar, where even these smaller groups are getting together, where you don't need to have 300 people in a room hearing the message. But if it's a message that is shared with even a dozen people who then are taking that message outward, particularly if it's elected officials who don't have somebody coming to do cleanup like you did afterwards, to be able to make sure that they understand and you share the benefits and refute some of the things that may be said that are anti-housing first, we're going to be in trouble. So we all have to be vigilant and think in terms of that kind of ongoing engagement, and be prepared to reach out and educate after someone may come to town who does not believe in housing first, because you can be chopped off at the knees pretty darn quickly when that happens.
Exactly. Thank you. And thank you, Courtney. Anyone else with other thoughts or things going on around their local area? Great. We want to thank you for your robust participation. It's always great to see everyone, especially since many of us are working virtually. So look for more from us around that policy gathering. Hopefully we'll put it together. I said tentatively December 13th, and we'll try to have an in-person and or virtual way of
Hybrid.
gathering. Yeah.
Yep.
And our next meeting for this group is Monday, December 5th at noon. So everyone, thanks again. Have a good rest of the month, and we'll see you soon.
Great to see you all. Take care.
Thank you.